Hi everyone, how are you? If you are joining me live, hi, welcome. If you're watching this on the replay, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining me. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I am more than happy to respond to those. Now, today, we are going to be busting some myths, okay? There's so many false information out there about the immigration process. And as you're going through it, you probably are believing some of these things, or you're really concerned about some of these things. So let's talk about it today. I have 5 of them that I really want to talk to you about. But if you have questions and you want to, get my opinion on one of your concerns, go ahead and put them in the comments. I am really happy to respond to your questions, okay? Oh, and by the way, if you don't know who I am U.S. immigration attorney Lillian Chukura. I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. Now, let's jump right in. The first thing, and this is one thing that I know people ask me all the time, is um, there, there's this belief that you have to wait months after getting married before you can start the green card process. Well, I'm here to tell you that you do not have to wait before you can start the green card process. We've had cases where we already knew they want to file. We were able to file the day after they got married. That's just, if you're out there and you're thinking that you have to wait months and months and months before you can file, I'm here to tell you, you do not. You can literally file the day you get married. Okay. The day you have your marriage certificate, you can file your green card application. Now, now, you still have to show that you are in a relationship, right? You still have to prove that. But here's where people kind of make the mistake. They think that you have to give everything to USCIS on the front end. No, you just have to meet the minimum requirements on the front end, knowing that USCIS is going to send you either a request for more evidence, right? And that's going to come months and months and months after you file, or an interview notice, which again is going to come months and months after you file. So you're able to now have those additional documents that you were holding off filing for, right? You were waiting to file because you wanted to have all these things together after your marriage, and you waited the months and months to start the process. Instead, you can file and then still get all those documents together and still be able to present that to USCIS. Now, those months and months, you're not waiting to start the process. You are already in the process. You are ahead of people that are waiting, right? Because you knew that you could start the process and then follow up with additional documents, okay? You can start the process and follow up with additional documents, because trust me, USCIS is going to ask you for those additional documents or schedule you for an interview. Okay. If they schedule you for an interview, you can take those additional documents with you to the interview. All right. The next one is that you need a joint bank account or a joint utilities, joint anything before you can start the process, or at all during the process. USCIS really just wants to know that you and your spouse are living together, are building a life together, have joint financial responsibilities. So if you're living together, are both of you paying the lease, the mortgage, whatever it may be, right? Are both of you paying the utilities? Are both of you responsible for those bills? That's what they really care about. Whether you pay for those things through your separate bank accounts, not really their problem, right? What they want to know is, how are you paying for those things? I've had situations where people have separate accounts, but one spouse pays all the bills through their account, and the other spouse, every single month, they sit together, figure out what their bills are, how much they need to pay, and one spouse transfers money from their account to the other spouse's account so that they can pay those bills. Is this a problem? No, right? They don't need a joint account to show that they are still jointly responsible for those bills, because they can show through their bank statements, right, through the deposits, this is when these payments came in and this is who it came from, right? So that is the key there. So having a joint bank account does nothing for your case unless you actually use the joint bank account. If you are still using your separate accounts for your financial needs, for, paying your bills, your joint account is just sitting there. Okay. So, do you need a joint account? No. But if you choose to have a joint account, please use the joint account. All right. Don't just have a joint account and have it sitting there. Use the joint account. Pay your bills through the account. Have your income go into the account. USCIS understands that you may want separate accounts, but if you have a joint account, you need to also have income going into the joint account, not just one person's income. Okay, having both incomes going into the joint account and having the expenses going through the joint account. And now people are going to ask me, what if I don't want all my income to go into that joint account? Well, guess what you can do? Guess what you can do? You can talk to your employer and have a portion of your income go into the joint account, and then the other part go into your separate account. That's okay. Right? I've had clients do that, and USCIS did not even bother them about it. All right. So if you're going to have a joint account, please use it. If you're not going to use it, don't even bother. Right. Because guess what? If you open a joint account, send the statements to USCIS, when you have your interview, they're going to expect updated statements, because now it's been months and months and months. They want to see how you're using that joint account. And if you're not using it, that raises a red flag. Okay. So you want to make sure that whatever you're giving to USCIS is not going to end up raising a red flag for them that will cause them to do a deeper fraud investigation on your case. You want them to look at your application and just be able to approve it on the officer level and not have to go through a fraud investigation, a notice of intent to deny. That's just going to cost you more time and money. All right. The next thing is, because people tell me this all the time. So people fall into two camps. They either think that green card applications based on marriage are always denied, or that they are always approved. I don't know where people get this, but that is that's a constant that I see all the time. People fall into one of two categories. Either they think it's always approved or they think it's always denied. Listen, do cases get denied? Yes. Do cases get approved? Yes. It just depends on your particular situation. So this is what I tell people all the time. Don't compare your case to someone else's case, because you do not know anything about their relationship. You do not know about their marriage. You don't know what type of documentation they have to prove their relationship. So if you have people in your life that their case got denied, do not assume that your case is also going to be denied, because again, you have no clue how they performed at the interview, what documentation they provided, none of that, right? They will not tell you any of that. So you want to make sure that when you are assessing whether to apply for your spouse or not, that you are really just looking at your situation, right? Not anyone else's, your own particular situation. Because when you come to me, I am going to be looking at your case, right? What documents do you have? How are you going to be prepared for this interview? Preparing you for the interview. We do all of that because your situation is completely different from the next person. So, really, there's no always denied or always approved. It's just on a case by case basis. And I will say this, USCIS officers are not obligated to deny cases or obligated to approve cases. There are situations where they have no choice but to deny a case, either the person does not qualify or they do not have a qualifying relative for a waiver. But in most situations, it's done on a case by case basis. And then the next one is that immigration authorities assume marriage fraud in every case. This is a myth, and this myth causes people to be so scared when they're scheduled for an interview. I see this all the time. You're scheduled for an interview and you get scared because you're like, oh, that means they think this marriage is not real because they're waiving interviews and they didn't waive my interview. No, it does not mean that. Okay. Most, most, most marriage based green card cases get an interview. Okay. Most marriage based green card cases get an interview. If your neighbor did not get an interview, that's not the usual person, right? That's not the usual case. Again, that's why you do not compare. Because once you start comparing, you're going to be questioning every single step of your case. All right. Most cases get an interview. So typically people get scared for the interview and they think, oh, the officer is going to just assume it's marriage fraud and be so difficult. That's not how it works. The officer is going to review your case. And if they see red flags, then they're going to be tougher in the interview. Okay. If they see, if they're looking at your case and they see all green flags, guess what? When you come in for that interview, they may only ask you certain questions just to get a baseline and have notes in your file for their supervisor in case that case gets audited by the supervisor. But they are not always walking in suspecting fraud. There are situations where that's the case, though. So if they have things in your file or they did basic research and found things that are negative, they're going to now have questions already for you. So it's really important that you don't think that immigration officers generally do not think that every case is marriage fraud. However, there may be things in your file or that they found with basic research that leads them to believe that there's fraud, and that's going to lead to the interview being harder. All right. Now, when you get to the interview, your answers to the question can also lead the officer to ask tougher questions. Right? It can lead the officer to suspect fraud in your case. So that's why I say before you get to the interview, make sure that you are really prepared. I have a whole video on how to prepare for your interview to make sure that when you're in there, you are answering the questions, you are being upfront with the officer. And guess what? When you're upfront with the officer with things that are, you may see as a negative, but the officer can generally understand why a situation is that way, they will not suspect fraud. But if you start hiding things from the officer and they find out a different way, fraud, red flags go off. So you want to make sure that as you are going through preparing for your interview, that you do not have it in your head, marriage fraud, the officer is going to think marriage fraud. No, no. Okay. Especially, and I'll tell this, especially if you have children together. If you have children together, 9 times out of 10, the officer is not even going to do an extensive interview on the I-130. Okay. Had this happened recently, all the questions were about the green card application itself and not about the marriage. Right? Making sure that the spouse qualified for the green card, not really, checking if the marriage is real. You have a child together, you're living together, you have documentation to show that. The officer is not going to have those red flags. However, if you are posting on your social media that, you can't wait to get divorced, you're so done with this person, you're so done with this situation, Again, unless you can explain um, that that was like a momentary thing and you two work through it, there's a way, the officer sees a lot of things. Okay, they are allowed to use your social media posts against you. So just be careful on what you're posting and what you're making public about your relationship. And then finally, um, this just ties in. The interview is excessively intrusive and intimidating. Is it intimidating? Yes, right? You are, for most people, this is the first time you're going to be going to an immigration office, sitting with an officer, being asked questions about your relationship, right? In your head, you're going into that really intimidated by the process, nervous about the process. I tell my clients all the time, it's normal. It's normal to be nervous. The officers know that this is one of the most important interviews that you will ever have, and they understand why you would be nervous, right? It's very nerve wracking to go through an interview process, and it is intimidating to be in front of an officer. However, the officers are not really allowed to ask you certain type of questions. There's a line that most officers do not cross when it comes to the intrusiveness of their questions. All right. There was a time, right? There was a time that they can get really intrusive, but typically the officers will not get intrusive. They may ask you what side of the bed you sleep on, but they will not, they're not going to turn around and ask you about sexual positions, right? So there's a line there that the officers do not cross. Now, if they suspect fraud in your relationship, they're probably not going to approve it right away and have you basically defend your relationship. And that's okay because that gives you an opportunity to send more documentation, to present more evidence of your relationship. But can the interview itself be nerve wracking? Yes. But the officers generally do not ask you excessively intrusive questions because, again, they're in the office with you. They don't really want to know certain details about your life, right? They don't want to know certain details, so they keep it very PG for the most part. I've had situations where the officer kept it PG, but my client did not. So it was it was an experience. The officer did feel a little uncomfortable. However, they still approved the case. Okay. So the officer themselves are not going to ask you excessively intrusive questions. However, it may come up in your answer. So just know they're not going to hold it against you. All right. Those are the 5 myths that I really wanted to debunk for you today. So the first one is that you have to wait months after getting married before you file the green card application for your spouse. That is a no. You do not have to wait. You can file with what you have and then supplement later if you get a request for evidence or an interview notice. You do not need a joint bank account, but if you do have a joint bank account, please use it and make sure that you have your income going into the account and your expenses coming out of those accounts. Green card applications always get denied or always get approved. No, it just depends on your particular case. If your case is approvable, it will get approved. If your case is not approvable because of suspicion of fraud or something else, the officers will give you an opportunity to respond to their suspicion and then make a final decision. So everything is case by case basis. Immigration authorities assume marriage fraud in every case. No, your documents, your answers to the question, their light research before your interview is what's going to make them think that there may be fraud here or think that there may not be fraud here. So you really want to make sure that your documents that you're presenting show what you want it to show, right? You want to make sure that that you are prepared for your interview. And then lastly, interviews are excessively intrusive and intimidating. They are not excessively intrusive. The officer will not ask you any extra questions. They pretty much keep it PG. And yes, just by the fact that you are going into an office with a government officer and answering questions about your relationship, that in itself can be intimidating, but most officers do try to be friendly, do try to, calm you down with the process. Those are the 5 things. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. I am more than happy to respond to those. Okay, so I see a question from Isaac. Good morning. My spouse had a child in Africa when she was very young. We have 4 children here in the US and we omitted the child in Africa. Can we still update the forms? Okay, so that it depends, right? Okay. You have an interview coming up. Okay, it depends. So the issue is if you have a child, you need to disclose your child. So yes, you can update that during the interview. I guess the question will that your spouse needs to answer is if they are physically in the US and um, they got a visa to the US, did they disclose the child on the visa application? Okay, so those are 2-part things, but definitely disclose the child during the interview and make sure the forms are accurate. All right. If you hide stuff from USCIS and they find out about it, it's going to be a problem. All right. So go ahead at your interview. Um, the officer is going to go through your forms again and ask you, do you have children? Yes. How many children? In this case, it will be 1 child from a previous relationship, and my husband has 4 children, right? So it needs to be clear, and your forms need to be accurate, and you can update it during your interview, all right? Do not wait, okay? Do not get an interview and then not tell the officer the truth because again, because the child was from a prior relationship and wasn't born during your relationship, typically the officer may not hold that against you, but you not disclosing it, they can certainly hold that against you. So you want to make sure that you are presenting accurate information to USCIS at all times. All right. If you're watching this on a replay and you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I'm more than happy to respond. And if you are getting value out of this video so far, don't forget to hit that like button. All right. So I don't see any other questions. So thank you all so much for joining me. If you have immigration questions or you would like to know if you qualify for a green card, preparing for interview, all those things, feel free to reach out. You can schedule a strategy session with me by going to my website, lilylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. Thank you all so much. I will see you next time. Oh, and by the way, next Friday, we have our Q&A. So the immigration Q&A. So join me same time. And you will be able to ask me questions live. If you want to send questions ahead of time, you can go ahead and put them. I will be making a community post, so you can go ahead on my YouTube channel and put your questions there, or you can send it ahead of time to info@lilylegal.com and just tag it YouTube question. All right. Thank y'all so much. See you next week.